God, I remember that earlier.
Oh.
Rather than later.
Now we have to start over.
I've got that though, thank you.
All right, so they have been approved. We are 6 minutes ahead of schedule
Perfect.
and ready, almost. To move on to the Catamount Outdoor Family Center Wedding Update to Management Plan.
I guess I'll speak to that. So I revised, this is our third time. Talking weddings, and I think we finally narrowed. The written response down to be concisely answering the questions. That our easement holders were asking. And that was the next step in the process. Before the select board would consider amending, before we recommend a change to the management plan. So. Hopefully had a chance to read that ahead of time. But it reflects, I believe, what our conversation was together in person at the last meeting. Assuming you read it, any sections you wanted to look at or focus in on?
I didn't print it. Can you slowly roll up through it just so we can get just. Because I did read it, but.
I had a question. I felt like we had, talked about like, just from our minutes, we discussed capping the number of celebrations per year. I didn't see it mentioned on this proposal.
Under frequency of weddings, that would be where the amperage would be. So lead down to point number 2 there. Yeah, so larger TEP events are limited to a maximum of 12 a year. So the weddings would be part of that count that hit the cap. And then smaller weddings, there would not be a limit under the current policies for the number of small celebrations weddings that do not trigger any TEP criteria. It's anticipated there'd be some public interest for non-TEP weddings, however, given the limited nature of amenities, it may not be a large number. So there's no number here, but that's what the answer is.
There is no number.
For the non-TEP ones,
Right.
but for the TEP ones, which I think, clearly there's a limit there.
And we already have a few TEP events that take up that 12, so there's less than 12 really available at this moment.
I also, well, if you scroll back up. Is this what we're going to submit?
This would be what the letter would be a written response to the easement holders coming from the town. That our committee would approve to answer their questions. So that they would say, yeah, that sounds good. Why don't you go ahead and draft, you tell me if I'm wrong, draft the edits to the management plan and. With this understanding and that context. In fact, I even put in the document, although you can change it. At some point, what the edit to the management plan would be if you go down to the bottom of the document. So yeah, so this would be a letter saying, hey, here's the answers to all your questions. And here's what we would be asking to put in the management plan. Celebrations may be held at CCF along with tents and other temporary structures. This is basically cutting and pasting what we said for, bike races and skiing and just replace bike race to celebration.
And to just clarify the process a little bit. This would be submitted to the easement holders. Additionally, this is also helping, it already is, the town's due diligence in looking into what needs to be done to make this change. And that would be what I would bring back to you, assuming that the easement holders say to move forward. So we come back to this committee to discuss further. Draft that amendment and then eventually submit to the select board. And like I said, I've begun doing that due diligence. Yeah, it's ongoing.
So I did review it beforehand. I don't know if I'm here technically for the trail stuff.
Great, we're talking about you like you're not even here.
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay with you all.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great. Yeah, so I reviewed it all beforehand and, yeah, and also reviewed everything with respect to the conservation easement and also your management plan. So section 3, paragraph 10, or maybe not section 3 because this is no, that's right, section 3. Paragraph 10, it does, as you all know, give you that reserved right to be able to hold celebrations that are commercial in nature. Weddings are commercial events. There's nothing not commercial about someone paying you to use the property for an event. And that's standard across all easements. I do a lot of these approvals for farms and things like that. The greatest thing that we're considering when we do approvals for this, yes, it's a reserved right, and the language is like very clear in the easement that it may not overwhelm the primary purposes of the conservation easement, which are public access and the natural resources, which again, that's all listed at the beginning of the conservation easement. This is a great summary of conceptually what you are thinking about. I mean, I think in terms of the easement perspective, it should be fine. I think that for what you would want to incorporate into your management plan, this is like very up here, like soft and flexible, and I think you'd want to have like a much more specific, clearly outlined thing in your management plan, so that when events come up, it's like, yep, sure, it's in line with the management plan, or no, because when you have something that's a little bit more amorphous like this, that's like, oh, some events won't trigger this, but some events will, and then every single event is needing to be assessed by the committee and also the nonprofit, and then also the town. That's just gonna give you more headaches and like not actually, it sounds like the purpose of wanting to do weddings is to streamline like a financial income for the nonprofit, for it to be more financially sound so that you can do the work that you want to do. And the last thing you want is to not make that be a streamlined, easy process. So I think, and engaging with the public, and I'm helping a friend plan a wedding, and I'm sure a lot of you have planned weddings, but it's an easier thing to do is like this number of people max, this is where your event will be held. These are the vendors that we work with, like if you're planning to set up a tent or things like that. And then for smaller events, it sounds like you're also proposing to happen around the property anywhere. I had some questions about how you would get there, because the easement does restrict motorized vehicles, and mechanized vehicles, and so does the management plan. So again, thinking about weddings, like that would mean that you probably wouldn't be able to go, you would be in violation of the easement if you took like a little golf cart up and like a bride didn't want to walk up in a dress to a spot that's not this wedding field. So just some things to think about in terms of wedding logistics. And also for the public access piece around parking, then I was really curious about this number of, what is it, 275, that 225 people. If you're planning to host weddings of 225 people, where are all of those cars gonna park? And how does that work with not coming in conflict with the public? And maybe they're so infrequent that it doesn't actually become a problem, but I think if the community starts to complain, that is something to consider in terms of balancing uses at the property. Just, those are my thoughts.
Many, go ahead, Al.
No, I was gonna say, I think, you bring up a good point in terms of that, trying to have a structure so that there's
Can I
not.
just ask you to introduce yourself? We have
I'm
a new
sorry.
member of the committee watching online.
Yep, I came in late. I'm Alan Cote. I'm vice president of the nonprofit Catamount board. I think, part of it, the thing you brought up about sort of the size, number of people and such, like, I think that's where we work with the town carefully. Such that, any sort of event at Catamount, whether it's a bike race, a running race, a ski race,
Mhm.
or a wedding, sort of all falls under that same structure that the town's built for event permitting, and that we have built with the town through the license agreement.
Mhm.
And there are things that are specific in the license agreement to Catamount, because it's a unique property in the town.
Yeah.
So I guess we have this sort of structure in place with the town, what triggers a event permit, what does not, how we work with the town. So I think a lot of that actually is in place. And from the nonprofit's perspective, I guess, we're trying to say that weddings really are in many ways no different, and in some regards, lower impact than having a bike race or a running race. It's a
Mhm.
contained thing. It's not people through the whole trail network. Like, there was a
Right.
race this past weekend. And much of the north side of Catamount was occupied by the bike race. The public had full access to the south, but their wedding would be even more contained.
Mhm.
So, I think, you bring up good points on that, and we would love to streamline it too, but I think it's that. Permitting process and the towns and stuff, I think that exists well with the structure we have with the town right now.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm curious on your thoughts, as well, Andrew.
Yeah, I'd say my thoughts, as far as the structure for the TEP, I agree that I think the structure of that, the way it's set up works.
Mhm.
I think below that threshold, below that 225, and obviously there are the other thresholds. I think some more clarity, about what those events would look like, would be helpful. 225 seems like a lot of people. What would a 150 look like, and how would that be, reviewed, basically? Maybe it wouldn't. How do we set up a relationship between the town? So kind of like Rebecca's saying, it is a streamlined process that is, as I see it, family centered, doing that, and really just, going back to the license agreement, reporting every year that, this is how many of those we had.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's what I was speaking to, because I've reviewed the license agreement.
Yeah.
So also in the future, license agreements should be sent to VLT for review and approval, because they are those long-term things for yes, I'm speaking to everyone, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I'm attempting to make eye contact with all, as I speak. So that does need to get review and approval. We did get it retroactively and have reviewed it and approved it. I read through it, saw the TEP stuff, that all makes sense. I think what I'm describing in terms of parameters is less about a town permitting process and more about if you incorporate it in your management plan, and all the parties are coming together and it's like clearly outlined, it's to reduce having to get a permit for each wedding or like celebration, and it's more like, this is where we cap it, this is where they happen, and then on top of that, then it's like one and done, an addendum to the management plan is clearly outlined. The whole community has access to the management plan, they understand the expectations, they know that maybe there's a couple reserved community parking spots that wedding guests or event guests don't use, and that's where.
Right.
Whatever, and so then it's like a one and done, and then you don't have to keep coming back. You don't have to get we meet this criteria and therefore we need to get a TEP permit. Or I guess that's redundant, a TEP.
I mean, I guess that'd be an interesting idea, right? Today, anything that hits TEP threshold, we have to individually attend the select board, present, and get an individual approval. There's nothing pre-approved. Are you suggesting maybe that we have pre-approved weddings that are above the TEP thresholds that don't count? I mean, I guess that would be changing the TEP regulation, right? Like, we're subject to the TEP regulation, except that the license agreement says that our thresholds are higher. So, like, on one hand, we gotta get a TEP anyway, individual, there's no like streamlining that. You have to get a TEP, it's the whole process.
Probably would make it easier if someone has to approve these, if it was pretty spelled out, if it's like, oh, another wedding, we know what that looks like, But otherwise, you're not gonna change the TEP process.
I mean, doesn't the
Yeah.
license agreement already spell out what, basically that we're allowed to do events?
The TEP process is more about making sure that the fire department's okay and the police department's okay.
No, the license agreement.
Yeah. TEP process, I'm saying, is sort of, feels like it's outside of this discussion. The limits may be
Right.
lower if
Right.
it makes sense.
We're not gonna get like a wedding of 300 people pre-approved and not
Right.
have to do the TEP. We'll
Right.
still have to do the TEP,
Right.
like that's a given.
Yeah.
So like the confines we're operating under is this existing approval structure. Which the TEP and the license agreement together define. I think then if we say like under 225 people. Like there's currently license agreement. And management plan, TEP, like there's no approvals necessary. If we do a
If
bike
it-
race that's 175 people. If it just happened to be a bike race where people got married too, like that wouldn't be requiring approval either, so. I don't know if we're suggesting additional approval constraints for weddings below 225 and that don't meet the TEP threshold, is that?
One of
Where
the
we're going?
TEP thresholds is events that involve the service of alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, that would.
So-
So no matter what number we
Right,
hit there,
right.
if
It
they
doesn't
want that,
matter.
we have to go.
Well,
through.
conceptually, we
That's
were
right, yeah.
envisioning
I
some people
gathered
might
that,
have a
yeah.
wedding without alcohol.
Sure, yeah.
And in
I
fact,
don't know.
we're going to incur.
Or a birthday party. Because we're actually considering this
Yes,
as celebration,
celebration,
right,
yeah.
not
Yeah.
weddings.
Yeah,
I mean, and that
weddings
was,
are just like always the most extreme, and so.
I mean, that was the question on
We've
a
never been to
birthday
a kid's
party.
birthday party recently.
If somebody says, hey, can I come there with 30 kids and have a birthday party there? Our answer is. I don't know, call Andrew, the management plan doesn't speak to this. We can't,
I mean, the easement does though.
the easement does. Right,
Would you be charging them for the? Like, is it, are you, because the property is a public access property,
Yeah.
right? So if people showed up, didn't call, had a birthday party with 30 kids and biked around, that's
can I
nothing.
ask a question? Because I was reading in the community forest plan.
Just for the record, I've totally done that. Not 30 kids, but like I just showed up with my kid and a cake.
understand, because it's
What
public
is-
access, it's a public access property owned by the town, you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But then afterwards, somebody was like, I think you needed to ask and like maybe do insurance. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person that's done that.
I mean, I'm just curious what this means. However, the dispersed, that word is strange to me. The dispersed pedestrian public access is free. In accordance with the grant funding the federal community forest program and Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. I didn't know what that means. What is dispersed pedestrian public access?
That's pretty standard easement language, it was
Uh-huh.
probably pulled from the conservation easement as a protected right. Dispersed just means
Not a
throughout the
large group.
property.
It also means not a large group together, right? And you're spreading people out rather than
I mean, if you had 50 people show up and do a birthday party
in the event field.
in the event field, is that dispersed pedestrian public access?
Are they just showing up and using it, or is it an organized, like, through permission, through permits or whatever? Like, dispersed public
Yeah.
access just means that the public has access throughout the property. That's all that means, dispersed pedestrian public access, it's the same language that's in.
But I guess how does the 50 people show up and take over the field that we're trying to use for camps that are paid activity?
That would be a user conflict then, right?
Uh,
So I don't,
that's a different topic then.
yeah, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily. What is your question around the dispersed?
Well,
What
I
are you
was just,
trying to
I was
understand?
just trying to understand what this meant in the context of your question. Would we charge them to do a birthday party of 30 people?
I think that still speaks to the question that Jean raised about our notes from last week. like,
Yeah.
That's, or a month,
Well,
that was the
this-
exact same.
And this is all the
Question we
same
have.
topic, the topic is celebrations,
Right.
right? So birthday party, bar mitzvah, wedding. You know,
So you're
all
trying-
sorts
I
and
think-
sizes, we're trying to seek clarity on.
Yeah,
Obviously, the higher level weddings could potentially be, you know, a benefit to the community, obviously, but also a potential revenue stream to help the nonprofit be viable. But we're trying to answer the question for all of these, including, you know, 30, which is why I asked what this disbursement. If this means 30 people doing a birthday party, then of course it's free, we couldn't charge them. But if that's not what this meant, then I guess we could, the nonprofit could say, oh, you wanna do a birthday party, 30 people, yeah, it's like a $2 a person or something, I don't know.
So that paragraph is the reserved right for dispersed public access throughout the property. There's another paragraph in the easement that says you have the right to charge the public for activities. And then there's another paragraph again in the easement that says the right to authorize the temporary commercial or non-commercial uses of the protected property. So all of those different situations, are what you would outline in the management plan, the properties, Catamount, the Catamount Community Forest Management Plan. And so what my suggestion was in terms of laying out these parameters that don't trigger the TEP is to both offer guidance for the community and also offer guidance between all the parties managing the property that sets clear parameters for streamlining activities so that these questions that you're asking, if a group of 30 children want to come and have a birthday party on the property, they know exactly what to do and what the process is and where the birthday party can be and what sort of things they can show up with and where they can park. And so that is, I think what I'm trying to get at and describe is more process around how all parties manage these activities as opposed to the process of, oh, the nonprofit has a request for a wedding. Now we go to the town. Now we go to the committee. Now we get a permit. It's more like, okay, we've come together as a group and this is how we will guide the public through our shared process of allowing weddings in the wedding field, and that's where all weddings will occur. And if there's small off the beaten path stuff, then that's fine. You have to walk there, you have to like do whatever the other parameters are. And if there's alcohol at a wedding, you clearly have to go through the TEP process. But so that's what I'm speaking to. And like, you guys decide if you want to require people who bring their kids to have a birthday party there and you want to require that there's a payment associated with that, then that is up to the town and the community, Forest Community Foundation. What's a shorthand for you guys? What can
COFC.
COFC, thank you. The town, the COFC and the committee, you guys decide that that's what you wanna do. And then also, of course, people are just gonna show up and do that. That's fine. It's a public access property. That's like what the nature of parks are. Parks encompassing the big word of what a park is, whatever. Does that make sense?
And I think it's something that actually we have struggled with. This is the celebrations is an example, but one we've always used is, like there's a running group from Richmond, and they want to show up with 20 people. Yeah, they have free pedestrian access. Like, at what point does your group become an activity that sort of triggers this thing? Like, likewise, if you show up with your kids and one friend and a birthday cake, like that's pretty clearly, you don't really need to tell anybody that. But if you're bringing 50 people, maybe that's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's sort of independent of whether it's a celebration or a run or a mountain bike ride. Like we've kind of always struggled with this. Like, at what point does it become an activity rather than just people showing up? Like,
Totally.
and we don't really have an answer to that. But that's, I in a way, I don't think that the celebrations are really any different than the mountain bike rides or the runs or whatever, like, or one that Matt Boulanger used. Or the town planner from his previous job there was like yoga on the beach where he used to be planner, and like, well, if you call up a couple of your friends and say, let's go to the beach and do yoga, like that's fine. But when you put it out on Facebook and you put ads on lampposts and there's 50 people showing up, like it's a different thing.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
And that's, I think, kind of what we're talking about here, and it's sort of independent of celebrations or anything else. And I guess maybe I'm suggesting here that we don't go, like, on one hand, we should go into that, but at the same time, that's almost a different issue from weddings. Like, I think the nonprofit's position is that weddings, the way we read the easement and such, weddings should be no different than any other event, whether it's a running event or a bike event or a skiing event. Wedding is another event and should sort of fall just under the same thing, use the same TEPs. It actually has less public impact than those other things. So I guess that's kind of the takeaway for me is that can we just kind of consider weddings to be another event that Catamount does and not try to sort of redefine the parameters for them, because we already have all those parameters set up.
Mhm.
But I see your point about trying to maybe enshrine some of that in the management plan, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that exactly, but I see the value of it, yeah.
Yeah, I think weddings are definitely, in terms of the easement, you're spot on, they are considered the same as other events.
Yeah.
With a mountain biking event, it's very clear where the mountain bikers are gonna be,
Yeah.
and so, and when you're talking about doing these other kinds of celebrations, that's where I think it is important with regard to the easement and also with regard to your management plan to identify the spots that those are gonna happen.
Yeah.
Which it sounds like you already have, but not necessarily officially in the management plan. The like wedding field is, I don't think I read that in the management plan. I could have missed it. I read so many management plans. And also this is.
The management plans is silent on celebrations, that's
Right.
our thing, like, it's just silent on celebrations.
Right,
And
which
and I
makes
think
sense.
there might be some, there is a difference, the mission of when the town went into this agreement, we were not setting up a wedding venue. Right, and so
I
this
don't think
is,
that's true.
I've understand the McCulloughs did 2 or 3 a year, and okay, you can do 2 or 3.
I
a year,
can
but
I
don't-
can provide a little bit of context for that
Okay,
because I
finish. I don't
actually
really, I'm sorry if you want to cut you off, but I know we have a short time and a lot to get through, but I just want to say that I think that there's more discussion there, but maybe. Perhaps, what was the purpose of this? It sounds like you don't think the license, is that the right term? That
The conservation
the
easement,
conservation easement would be, that this seems to fit within the easement, is what you started saying, right? You have some
Yes.
other ideas and some other comments
Yes,
that we should take under consideration, but your first blush is that this would fit within the easement.
it is in line with the conservation
Right.
easement as an accessory activity that does not overwhelm public access.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's.
Which is
I just
important, we
wanna-
don't have it there yet.
Okay.
Can I
Okay.
just add quickly that I facilitated the writing of the management plan, and I'll just say that celebrations are not in there, not because for the only reason that celebrations are not in there is that we ran out of time. That's it. It wasn't that like there wasn't in the spirit of the property, that it wasn't something that we didn't think the property was for, or that it wasn't reflective of what the town was acquiring. We just ran out of time.
And it's also okay for things to be silent in the management plan. I've seen towns be silent on hunting in management plans and like for other reasons, but it like, just because it's silent doesn't mean that there's no path forward.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just want to point out that we also have the comprehensive trail plan to talk about.
yeah.
We're a little bit behind our agenda time, but that was really important discussion and information.
Yes.
to add.
So we're gonna send this letter to you, but you've already looked at it, and I guess you can
Kind of
respond to it, and
Do you want me to do a written response in it?
I don't
Yes,
know,
sure.
is this enough?
Does this have to go to the select board? I can't remember what our.
So this topic would eventually go to the select board as an amendment to the management plan. They would need to approve that. Before we do that, we need to draft that amendment of the management plan.
And
That's-
before we
that'd
did
be
that, they
next
told us to ask the easement holders. And then the easement holder had these questions, and now this is their answers to the questions.
Right, so
And if they accept the answers to the questions, then we can draft the management plan with their input.
Right, okay.
Yes, I
Yeah.
feel like I've responded to your questions through this
Yeah.
meeting and have maybe offered a couple of additions to what the amendment could look like.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when you have the amendment, you don't have to draft a letter, you can just like shoot it in an email to me and we can, or like on a Word document or whatever. It can be a very iterative back and forth kind of process once you've established, together what you want that language to look like.
So to clarify, and I think this is similar, we're gonna have the same conversation here with the trail plan. The final approval, so to speak, from the easement holders will be once that draft amendment is finished, it's approved,
Is ready to go.
ready to
select
submit to the
board.
select.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so next step is we gotta draft the language. I had drafted.
You
one.
have a draft in here, yes, and I did look that over. I think it was maybe, I don't know. I would say in terms, the management plan is supposed to help guide also the public as well as the committee. And so I think if you want to have clear guidance for the public when they're considering doing celebrations on the property, you might want to include some guidance language in your amendment language there.
Okay. We can
That would be
consider
a suggestion.
Yeah.
Cause otherwise you're gonna get calls and then you have to like address every call and then you're just making more work for yourself.
I'm not opposed to that. I really wonder if any member of the public uses that as a guide. I would frankly be surprised. You'd probably call up Andrew's office and say, you know, what can we do at Catamount? You know, I don't know, maybe you guys ever tell people to look at the conservation easement?
Or management plan.
Or actually the management plan, rather.
Never send someone to the concert.
No, we wouldn't do that.
I haven't received any calls in my time here, about events. I think, I assume they agree.
Oh, they probably call Catamount, they probably call it nonprofit, not.
They just come and do whatever they want anyway. I mean.
But it would,
Okay,
it would
good.
be nice to have the wording for the
Okay.
the public to see what their expectation is.
Sure. I mean, it'll be just more wording than what's in there for biking, right? So I just cloned that paragraph off of what we said that like commercial use of biking and bike races, you know, so. We'd be adding more clarification than was given for biking and, you know, other activities. I mean, we can look at that, see if we can add anything. It would be more guidance than was given in the management plan for the other two paid commercial activities that are already included in there. So I'd say like you know, we would be going above and beyond what they did initially on the management plan to provide clarification, which isn't a bad thing, but.
Yeah.
Okay, Danielle.
All right,
take us forward.
so. We're not voting on anything today. So we're just moving on to the next thing, knowing that we have. The manner we need to draft this plan further.
Yeah, just draft the management plan language. Yes, no?
Just for the sake of process and the way that we've set this out, if you could do a vote to just approve, yes, this is the, you know, preliminary proposal. I think that would be good, just so we can, I don't know, kind of like. Have some,
The idea was to approve the letter that we could send it to the easement holders, but they short cycled that, so.
right, yeah, which is
now-
very nice,
You're
Rebecca,
welcome.
thank you for being here.
So do you want us to approve the letter, or do you want us to approve the temporary, the current wording for the draft forest management plan amendment?
Well, this is not the wording for the management plan.
The management plan wording is
Oh,
further
just
in
that
here.
little-
So
Yes,
last
But
page.
Rebecca's asking for maybe some additional stuff for that.
I'm just suggesting that you would put some additional stuff in that. I think it's up to all three parties, the town, the committee, and the nonprofit, to determine what that amendment looks like. And how much guidance you wanna offer. I think, yes, weddings and celebrations are a reserved right in the conservation easement, section 3, paragraph 10, as I stated. And the second half of that paragraph says that that the details of it are provided for in the management plan.
Mhm.
Trying to skip over the fancy easement language and just get to the
Thank you.
actual English language. So, I mean, yeah, and yes, weddings and celebrations are different than having a running event or a mountain biking event. Yes, they are both the event types that are protected by the conservation easement. They are also different events. I don't think you could ever say that a celebration of like people gathering and sitting at tables or whatever and doing a celebration event is the same as having a mountain biking race. They're different types of events. They are both events that are protected by the conservation easement. There's no debate there. So that's why I think it is imperative, or it would be a good idea to outline it differently in your management plan.
Okay.
And I would add to that, this is something that staff has been looking at. I've been working with Eric a little bit on this, how to go about doing it. And not yet ready to provide any guidance to the committee on what staff thinks is right as far as process. So I think back to the question about like kind of approving this, you know, concept, like doing a concept approval of this, I think that would be appropriate. Just because our review is ongoing.
Well, can I motion to approve it?
I'm,
The concept approval.
I'm uncomfortable. I don't know this was I didn't know this was a decision that we we're making tonight. I read it over. I thought this was something we were sending off for further review, so I would prefer not to vote on it. If you want a thumbs up, I'd have to give you, in concept, it's okay, but if we're voting that this is the wording I think should go in, I don't think I'm ready to do that.
So that's not it's not a vote, that's the wording that's submitted to the select board,
Mhm.
but it's a. Thumbs up whether or not that's a vote to staff, and, we've got. The review from DLT, so it's a moot point to review it and.
Shall we
come back.
continue and write the language for the management plan? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I don't think, maybe the formality is more this.
Yeah.
Danielle, what do you think?
It feels hard to know what to vote on quite.
Right, I
Okay.
don't really know what to vote on.
We'll take a look at this as drafted, and
Yeah.
we'll come back to you.
Great.
Awesome.
And so you are going to do the wording on the management plan, not sending it back to Outdoor Family Center to do that.
It's going to staff.
It's going to staff.
No, we're looking at what has been put together,
Yep,
and I think there is additional due diligence that the town has to do.
okay,
An example is looking at the grant. The grant requirements for this. As a community forest, program for us, like this is tied up in some money with the grants. We have some due diligence responsibilities we have to basically uphold. So that's something we're looking at. That's an example.
I don't understand, what grants are you referring to?
So the main one that I'm talking about is the US Forest Service grant. And there's basically a grant agreement, and there's federal money tied up in the land that helped purchase it.
Oh, I see, okay.
And there are some different requirements in that agreement, than are necessarily said in the easement.
Okay.
And so that's something I reached out to a representative from the US Forest Service to just ask about this sort of thing.
Okay.
maybe I can ask for time on the agenda next month to continue this. Or this discussion with the information coming from the staff doing their due diligence at this point.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Sounds good.
It's sort of yeah, we've got two balls rolling here.
Okay,
And so I think it's a question too for the committee, where that goes.
all right. Well, I think we give you a thumbs up.
Yes.
Excellent.
Indeed.
Very good.
All right. Thank you. Let's move to Catamount Comprehensive Trail Plan. And we are trying to speak fast.
No, I know, John probably has about 4 hours of this.
Right. I believe before we actually turn to Catamount Outdoor Family Center, Andrew, wanted to do a quick process review for us.
Right, once again, guardian of the process, I guess. No, as the staff member, I'm just trying to make this clear for the committee, for the family center on what we're doing, and there's been some conversation back and forth with the family center. This came from Eric on the process for this. So I'm just gonna share this memo that I wrote up. I'm trying to not only show the process, but also define everybody's roles here. Was given the complexity of this proposal. So I won't read it verbatim. But basically, the town and easement holders must agree to approve the trail plan. For the community forest plan. The town's responsibility is to ensure that the proposed plan is in compliance with the legal documents associated with the land. And the CCFC, this committee, is tasked with providing review. You're the primary body that will review this. Eventually it will be submitted to the select board, but they'll be looking for your recommendation for approval if they review it. Staff will be here to provide information on the process, like right now. Any recommendations that you request, and per the staff perspective on this, and also to answer questions. If you have work you'd like me to do, questions that I can answer. That is also my role. So the review process is very similar to what we've been doing so far with the weddings proposal. Tonight, the goal is for COSC to introduce the comprehensive trail plan. And then the next step would be to discuss its compliance with the easement, community forest plan and forest management plan. The license agreement also discusses it, so that will also be included. Then there will be some, can be some discussion. The next few steps are kind of depending on where the discussion goes, if there are requested amendments, et cetera. Then eventually, once this committee recommends approval, it would go to BLT and also VHCV and then the select board. I did call out a couple key sections of the legal documents that discuss trails. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list. They're relatively detailed documents and your interpretation is your interpretation. Committee's here to discuss those, but I just wanted to point a couple of them out as an example. I'll just pull up the community forest plan section I thought was relevant. There's this section on trails. There is discussion here about guidelines for new trails, what that looks like, reasons for new trails. And that continues into the next couple pages, or really the next page here in this case. That is all I have, Danielle. If you'd like me to say anything else, yeah.
Maybe the timeline, I guess, maybe that's a discussion for the committee here right now. It looks like we're definitely you will be introducing the plan. Will we have time to discuss it today, or I don't know about comments? Hopefully we'll get through. Are we hoping we'll get to comments today too, or are we just listening to the presentation?
I mean, I would hope that you guys ask questions as you need.
Great.
There's no reason to let me talk for an hour and then leave. That seems.
40 minutes.
Is that right?
That's fast. That didn't fix
Still fast. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want this to be me talking. This should be collaborative and it's going to be collaborative throughout.
Sounds good.
So what I need to say, I think Danielle,
Right, I don't know how far we're gonna get tonight, so we wanna get as far as we can, so
Okay. How do I share?
if you would join the Zoom meeting, I can make you a co-host. That's the only way for people online to see what you're presenting.
While we're waiting, I'm just gonna say I'm a relatively new member myself, but I have no expertise in what trails should be open, closed, or changed, so, what is the committee's role in reviewing this plan? I assume that the Outdoor Family Center is really the experts in the trails. I would be interested at some point in seeing if the community has any, we only got two, one being the McCulloughs, so I think it'd be nice to have some broader input from users of the trails, but I am certainly not gonna sit here and tell you, that trail doesn't need to be widened. So I'm not sure what I'm reviewing for.
I think we've had, am I correct? We've done community outreach, is it 3 community outreach things on?
And an online survey for the
Online.
last
Okay.
year. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we have some feedback.
I'd like to see that, but.
Sure.
And Danielle, or that's someone who's been on the committee longer, I'm interested in what.
I think it's a good point, because like, how deep you wanna get into it, even as a Outdoor Family Center board, we have a trail committee, and like. I know every rock on every trail, every route on every trail, right? And it's taken me hours, to go through. Of course, it's taken hundreds of hours to prepare and give thoughtful feedback, and then it's been revised, so like. Yeah, I mean, if you wanna go like, well, why are this trail, why that trail?
It doesn't feel like
It'll
that as our role.
Okay.
It
okay.
feels more, right,
It just
feel
will
like
take a
our-
lot of time.
like, I think that we're like at the policy level, like where our
Okay.
job, there were headlines, but I do feel like we're jumping a little bit. There were headlines to your presentation.
Which is
like-
what I wanna start with, the goals, because that, you know,
We're not
looking at the map,
I tried to read through them and I.
Yeah, like just a reference, I'm not on the trails
Oh,
committee
he's
on the nonprofit, and like, I've just said, there are people who know this way better, like Hans and John and stuff, you know, and I'm staying out of it, so this is, I've seen this, but I haven't actually delved into it. So this is gonna be new to me too, but I think it's a good point that it's not even the nonprofit, it's the subset of the nonprofit that has the expertise in this that's really come up with it.
But our job is to look at the proposal with keeping in mind what Andrew pointed out on these, like, these trails should be for this reason.
So I can just read, it's one of the many lines in these documents that discusses trails. But in the community forest plan, there's a section that discusses new trails. Any new trails will need to be constructed using sustainable design, construction, and management practices, and will require the approval of the town, Vermont Land Trust, and VHCB. Additionally, new trails must be in conformance with all local, state, and federal regulations. With approval, trails may be rerouted from their current location to decrease erosion and avoid hazards, wetlands, riparian areas, or other sensitive natural features, or to create a larger buffer between trails and adjacent private land. That is one paragraph. The next page after that lists off trail maintenance objectives and best management practices. Your goal is the committee's goal is to review this, see what needs to be presented, and then looking at this plan that is presented to you, see that, is this compliant with that? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I wouldn't really know if what they were saying is compliant without walking the trails. So I hope that that's not really my role to decide this is compliant, because I have to get new boots.
the state also, just to be clear, the state has to, I mean, this is for an Act 250 permit, this is
Right,
not.
yeah.
This is gonna go through much higher level review than what we're doing, so. This is really more of a concept stage, and like, do we like the ideas that we're presenting and the goals that we're presenting? The state will have very clear yes and no's for us if we're, you know, out of line, and the land trust will have similar, you know, restrictions if we're.
If you're putting a 20-foot wide racetrack in the middle, I will probably question that. Otherwise,
It's not in there.
right, okay.
Perhaps we should watch your
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah.
I think I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I need to do something else?
Yes, it's
So I've made you co-host. And so now you should be able to, at the bottom, share your screen. You press the green rectangle. More. Host tools, share screen, there we go. Did it work? Slowly.
I cannot yet see online. I don't know if you all can see in the room.
I mean,
Oh,
I think
maybe that worked.
if it didn't work, we're just sharing the document, right? Andrew, you could share it on your screen.
Yeah, I can share the document. I didn't know if do you want me to share
I don't
the,
think there's anything else.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
no, that's, yeah, that's very easy, but I didn't know if you wanted to share the map on Google Earth
I do, but we may not get to that.
today.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the document
Yeah,
and then we can also talk later about getting that. Next time.
I know we got IT too. We got our full support.
How to screen share.
Hold on,
Andrew doesn't know how to do it either.
many documents here.
So I was at a conference many years ago. Where there's a room of probably 200 people. And they couldn't get the projector to work, so the guy actually stood up with his laptop.
I'm not gonna do that.
I'm sure you could see it really well.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yes.
So if you would scroll down to the goals, that'd be great.
I just have a quick question. Will you get to in your presentation, because I didn't see it outlined in your, why you're triggering Act 250?
We have an overarching Act 250 permit on the property. In fact, I'll start with that.
Great.
Because that's the history of where this came from. We wanted to initially improve Elbow, Balsams, and Three Rivers trails, which were high on our priority list, both as access into the network and through the network. The Three Rivers was identified by the town. It has several bridges on it that the town has set aside money to help us rebuild. So that was our first project that we were like, we gotta go do this. And in order to do that, we had to reach out to our Act 250 representatives and our wetlands people. So I reached out to Tina Heath, who was the Chittenden County wetlands person. And she came out, she walked with me, and during the course of the walk, she said, we can do this one permit for this one project, and then after that, you have to do the entire network. We can't have piecemeal permits for these Act 250 permits and wetlands permits anymore. And she gave examples of other organizations and other places that had tried to do that, and they said no more. So we got into that process and realized that we just might as well go with the whole thing rather than trying to do this one permit and then do the whole thing. So we bit the bullet and really try to do all of it at once in order to make this better for the town itself and for our state partners who are gonna review this. So,
And it's because the density of the trail network, or I saw on.
no, there's an Act 250 permit on the property.
Okay,
And so any change, and this is backed up by permit review sheets by my predecessors and by me asking the state, does this project need an Act 250 permit?
yeah,
Every time they said yes.
yeah. okay.
So we've reviewed.
Yeah.
If we could do this without an Act 250
I
permit,
understand,
we would.
yeah, I'm not challenging whether.
No,
or
no,
not it should
it's
be,
so,
yeah.
but that's where we got to, and we realized that we might as well do this all at once.
Mhm.
And really look at the whole network as a, you know, a system, and how is it working as a system and not in little pieces.
Mhm.
So that's where we started from. We established these goals, early in the process and have refined them as we've gone through. We experience a lot of, climate challenges right now. And in the last 2 years have really experienced another higher level, which we expect to continue. So we believe that working in the trail network and for climate resiliency and sustainability is our highest goal. We don't have to have winter that we can rely on anymore, and we have floods in almost every month of the year, or potential floods at least, including last year in December. We need to ensure the long-term sustainability of the organization. And that is in a changing climate and with competition from several other networks around us that are free to access and that are better at this point. For the last 5 years, when we've been kind of stuck without being able to do work, they've been continuing to build and make their trails better. We want to increase the trail accessibility to a wider range of visitors, and while managing shared use and reducing user conflicts. So within our trail designs and within the upgrades we want to do, these are all integrated into that. But increasing the trail accessibility is, I believe, imperative for a public network like this. We should not be restricting folks, and that directly addresses one of the concerns that was brought up in one of the public comment letters, which was that people in wheelchairs already have enough, and we don't believe that. And that is a primary reason for us to increase the accessibility of the trails out there. It's also to increase the accessibility of trails for people who aren't experts. Many of our trails are really expert only, and we want more people to be able to go out and use them. We want to make them usable in all seasons and weather conditions. There are trails that don't open pretty much year round. they're either too wet in the winter and then we don't get enough snow on them, they melt too quickly, or they're too wet in the summer. And currently we have trails that are just closed and we can't do anything with them until we get this permit. The connectivity, navigation, enjoyment of the trails, it's, if you've been out there, it's confusing. It's confusing to me, and I've really spent a ton of time staring at maps, and I still am like, oh yeah, I'm here now. So we really looked at the network overall in terms of how things connect, where they connect, trying to co-locate those intersections so that they became a hub and spoke system rather than 5 feet down the trail, there's another intersection, another 20 feet down the trail, there's another intersection, so that level of confusion goes down and the connectivity goes up. And at the same time, we're reducing our impacts throughout the forest. Those little intersections all the way along increase impacts. So we want to reduce overall impacts and maintenance. We have a tremendous amount of maintenance right now because these trails are not necessarily built or drained properly. So there are constant battles with the trails out there in order to keep them in a way that they should be. And as I said, we have trails that we just close right now because we can't do what needs to be done to them to protect the resources. We have identified that the lookout view shed is not ours to maintain currently, and we are looking at a new spot to do that. That would be entirely on the forest, or we reach out to the adjacent landowners and figure out a relationship that would allow us to keep that view shed open. But it is growing up quickly now, and in the next few years, that will potentially be gone. Reclaim and enhance the wedding field as a trailhead and event site. We've had challenges in the past using the wedding field because it is pretty soft. And it has grown in some places. Both Lucy and Jim have mentioned that it has shrunk over the years. And their piece of it is also something that will not be ours to access at some point. So we need to address that. And then we do want to close trail sections that are too steep or too tight, overly impactful, redundant, confusing, unsafe, or off Catamount Community Forest property. We identified on our trail map that there are a few pieces that are not on CCF land and that we do not have long-term protections for. So those are things that we really need to address. Andrew, would you scroll down a little bit? And those are our goals. And then for our trail standards, we chose the U.S. Forest Service, International Mountain Biking Association, the Town of Whistler, and Kootenai Adaptive as best practice standards. These are all things that I've used in the past with permits for work in the Green Mountain National Forest, on state land, on other town land, and on private land. These are well accepted. They're great standards and well worth looking into if you want to learn more about them. They describe pretty much everything that we're talking about here in terms of what we're doing, what types of work we want to do, the appropriate pitches and widths and challenge, all the back end stuff that we want to put into the trails. We also addressed wetlands, wet areas, and wet crossings because we have many of them, and we also are in wetlands in some places. And we definitely have bridges and crossings that we need to address too. We believe that it's super important to reduce our impacts in the wet areas and to really improve our drainage and to slow down the runoff as it is a problem currently in many areas. When we talk about trail closures, we do have many trail closures that we are proposing here. And I would say that we are not really suggesting any new trails, more that we are replacing trails that are not appropriate currently. Some of those that were identified were the power line, A line, and a section of Chameleon that was identified in insurance review that we had earlier this summer. We pointed them out to the insurance adjuster and said, the insurance assessor And said, we think that these are, that these should be closed because they're, not sustainable and potentially dangerous. Power line A line is has a nice top section, which is all on rock and does not cross trails at a weird angle. The bottom section, though, is all on dirt, and it is a eroding line that then crosses two trails at a 90-degree angle. So you would potentially have bad impacts there, both to the land and to any type of user conflict. So that is a spot that we have identified for closure. And then there was a section of Chameleon that crosses the jump line at a 90-degree angle, which is not right. So those are two that we identified that should be closed as soon as possible. But there are many, many sections of trails that we propose to close as they are either unsustainable or overly impactful.
And those are in brown on the maps.
No,
Okay,
purple
Purple.
is the vast majority of the closures. Brown is stuff that's off property.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just so when you are looking at the map, purple and brown are the things that would go away.
and the orange you would bring in.
Correct.
I spend a lot of time with these maps.
Do you need permission to close trails? Can't you just close them?
Again, this is part of this Active 50 permit. We can't just do things. It's a substantial change to the network, and so we need permission from the state in order to do this.
Even blocking off dangerous intersections, you don't have that.
It was approved as part of this network,
Hmm.
when it was first bought, and so maybe we're being overly cautious in this sense. But I've had worked with the state and seen all the permit review sheets, and every time they say you need a permit. So.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Taping off a trail because it's muddy or something like that versus like what you would do.
Actively
right?
closing it?
Like actively
We
close it.
could do that,
Okay.
yes. But in terms of like putting it back to bed and reducing the erosion problems and things like that. I mean, we've already closed Chameleon with a piece of tape. It doesn't cross that anymore. But we could close power line with tape.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that it will stay closed. As we've noted, people do what they want out there. And often our trail closures are torn down. So, I don't know that it's going to be effective necessarily at this point. It's much more effective to close it for real.
Just to clarify, when John says close it for real, my understanding is that like that would actually mean disturbing the area to some extent initially. And that like that's what would trigger the Act 250 permit, right? That it's not just a matter of putting a sign up and saying this trail is closed, but that there's actual like physical work that goes into it, and that physical work then triggers the Act 250 permit.
Correct. Yeah. And in order to reduce the erosion damage, we do need to do work. We need to, stop the flow down the hill. And then, the signage and naming, we also want to, there are several trail sections that we're trying to link that would then become one trail instead of 5 or 6 trails. That would also, I think, help with the navigation. Everybody would just be on Moose Poop as opposed to Gremlin, Moose Poop, Hawk, and it gets really confusing. And then in terms of signage, we also want to do that with the same phasing so that we're not getting into a $50,000 sign project that then we have to change as we go through the network. So as we change things within the network, we change the signage and the mapping to address that. The map key, as we look at the map, the white lines are the double track trails. So those are the wider ones. Sandmans, Three Rivers, Lookout, that type of trail. The green lines are our easier trails that are narrower. The blue lines are intermediate trails that are narrower generally. The black lines are our expert trails that are narrower than the double track trails. And then as we the red lines. Sorry. The red lines are our most difficult trails. And then the orange lines would be the ones that we want to replace the brown and purple lines with. So those are the reroutes that we're suggesting. And then the brown lines are the sections that are not on property, and then the purple lines are ones that we, think should be replaced. There is not an easy way to overlay the current map with the Google Earth map. But they do look good side by side, and you can look at those. And the same thing with the EPZ map from the, and the wetlands map from the land trust. Those all, and when we put our permit request in for Act 250, that all has to go into the state website, every single one of those lines, individually, and then be described to them too. So there's a long process. So we want to be sure that what we're proposing to them, that we feel good about. And then in terms of the phases, we talked about the trailhead areas are phase one. And so that's, around the hub and around the parking lot, the terrain areas that we have in that area. And then really to define a way or ways into the network from there, because now it's sort of amorphous and we have, muddy spots throughout that field. It's not as warm and welcoming and sustainable as we'd like. Phase two would be our Sandman's area. That is our most popular trail area, and that's why we chose that as phase two. And it's also a relatively easier area to work in with less pitches. It's quicker and easier to get into with machinery and with materials because of the excellent roads that have already been built.
Sorry, so is that the northwest or northeast? It's northwest.
Northwest, yes.
Where a lot of the logging just happened.
Yeah.
The logging part.
Yes, yeah. Phase three would be the Goose Hill area, so that's the south side network behind the house. And where the fields are mainly. That one has the least amount of change and work and seemed to be another like quick step forward. And then we left the most difficult area for last and likely to take 5 to 8 construction seasons for that larger area with the most changes in it. It's also our steepest area, which is why we've, broken it up into many more years. The only caveat to this is that we did not include the potential for a boardwalk from the wedding field out to the bottom of Goose Hill in the 2 to 3 construction seasons. That could be its own project for a year. So if we decide,
across the wetland area.
yes. And so the reasoning behind that is that if we lose access down the main road behind the house, that to get to the sledding hill, you will either have to go all the way to one side or all the way to the other and essentially make it a mile walk to get to the sledding hill, which will kill it. If we're being honest. So, there are some other corollary benefits to putting in a boardwalk there. It does seem like it would be a great spot for an ADA compliant, access and something that would really allow people to experience the forest who might not be able to get out, in other places. And it's a pretty beautiful spot to allow folks to get out into. It's not just like we put a boardwalk in and, you go through some trees. It really is meant to be,
Well, it would give you visibility to that big pond.
yes,
too.
and the views, it
Yes,
opens up a lot of what Catamount is. And then that would allow for the sledding hill to continue even if we lose access in this other place.
Yeah.
So if we want to do that in the future, it would be a separate Act 250 permit.
No, it doesn't have to be.
It's in here, so.
Yeah, it's in our proposal. I just didn't put it in the phasing.
Okay.
And I should adjust that to address it because it is a big project and one that it would take quite a long time to do. That really addresses the big chunk of what we're talking about. Does anybody have any questions or concerns at this point?
So sorry.
You go first.
I had 2 minor concerns about some trail reroutes that seem to encroach the EPZ
Which EPZ
The vernal pool EPZ,
along Sandlands?
I don't know the names of the trails.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Great,
So,
there's, do you know exactly where?
I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
So, is my understanding of that particular EPZ is that it has 100-foot bullseye
Mhm.
radius around it and then a 500-foot larger radius around it, and we are in the 500-foot.
You are not, no,
No.
so if you look at the map that I created, right, so. This blue line here, your reroute goes into that 100-foot. The orange line that you're rerouting will be going off of this blue line into that 100-foot radius. You're right, in the 500-foot radius, you're fine. It's in the 100-foot radius that you wanna not be in,
Right.
because that's the most
We
sensitive
will
area.
adjust that.
That's great, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
This.
And if we can't figure out a way to adjust it properly, we'll change that, and
And if we put it on the other side of the road, the west side of that gravel
that's
road,
outside.
that's outside, right?
That's fully outside the
Cause
500.
when you sent your map, I was like, ooh, our little connector there is going in that yellow circle.
I thought it was in the
Yes.
500 and not. in
But
the
if we went on
500.
the west side of that gravel path, which is the double track, oh,
Or if we stayed within the 500, not in within. the 500.
Correct, yeah, that, within the
okay,
500
so as
is
long as we
fine.
stay there.
It's really just the 100 and the easement has the most restricted language in there. No new structures, no disturbance or improvements with the exception of
Yeah.
pedestrian trails, but these are not just pedestrian trails. That pedestrian trails being like the really narrow, like the pedestrian trails is not the mountain biking. Yeah, anyway, it's not what
Yeah.
you're describing, and that's fine. I am not. I don't think that you did anything intentional. I'm just pointing out the ones, I'm doing my job, the one spot that has an error, and otherwise, everything else looked great, and you guys did a lot of work.
So because
Sorry
it's,
to bring up the one criticism.
No,
not
when
saying My admiration for the work.
I purposely looked at that spot because I know that of the two wetlands and, I'm sorry, the two vernal pools
Mhm. And then also the wetlands too,
Yeah,
but the wetlands again have the flexibility and you're describing using boardwalks and all kind of great practices, so I don't have any concern with that in terms of the easement either.
okay, so I don't know where you're talking about right now, so I'm assuming there are members of the committee that also don't.
They're right along the western border.
Look at-
That-
Yeah, so right here is actually what we're talking about.
Yeah,
And we had put a little thing like there.
that's exactly right, yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm
So-
just saying, get rid of that, the one that is north and keep the one that's south of it, though, that's
So
fine.
this isn't the 100 circle though, is it?
That is,
That's the 100 circle. Okay.
yes.
I thought that was the 500 circle.
No, that is the 100 and that's the most sensitive area, and then all of the like squishy stuff around it is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the most sensitive, no touch area, EPZ primary zone. And then the stuff outside of it is the secondary zone.
Did this work?
It's usually how we map that.
No.
I needed a password even now.
Oh, okay.
Can I point out that it's 6:47 and you came from, did you get to cover your questions?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
just to keep us.
Yeah.
Well,
That-
I did have one more question, which is just, would you consider moving the wedding field, given that it's wetter? The wedding field, I'm calling it the wedding field, because that's the name of it, not necessarily
You have
the
the deal
Lake
right there.
Events field.
That's cute.
Just as like a suggestion, since you mentioned that it's wet, and I'm thinking that, you know, in connection with the conversation earlier about wanting to do celebrations and formalizing that, you may consider putting it elsewhere that's a little bit more sustainable for you guys. But you know this
Sorry.
property better than I do, so I default to you. I'm
I have that
genuinely
question as
asking.
well.
Yeah,
Especially with the fact that there's solar panels in there too right now.
And it happens owned by the McCombs.
And, right,
I mean, we could have weddings over in the event field,
yeah,
but the view is not there.
gotcha.
And the access really isn't, is good either. I mean, there's a road into this.
Okay, Yeah.
And, they have already put some gravel in.
okay,
So there has been some work done already.
yeah.
And with you're right, there are now solar trackers on this side.
Mhm,
Over here too. Which is, you know, that's going to impact access through that area too, so. I think that it's, you know, there's a reason why it got put there.
Yeah.
And if we had, you know, another opportunity where we could have that easy access and the million view,
Yeah,
we would go there, but we don't.
absolutely, sure. Thank you.
Sure. Jean, you had a question too?
Is this is a plan, so it's not obligating. We're not obligating the town to a 10-year plan that, or are we?
No, and the town has no obligation. I mean, we really do, you know.
Well,
in terms
I mean,
of- In terms
The
of,
outdoor
like,
family center does,
yes,
and there's a 5-year. I'm not saying we're not gonna keep renewing, but there is a 5-year deal with the outdoor family center. Right? 10-year, okay,
Mhm.
so you gotta get all the work done before then. Yeah.
well, you know, this is, this permit will live beyond, you know, us if we don't exist anymore too.
Right, and it could be.
It can be amended, it can be
right,
changed,
yeah.
those things too, yeah,
Okay.
so this is not like everything's in stone. And honestly, we will probably get partway through this phasing process and be like, wow, no, we probably need to change this one.
Mhm.
And so, you know, this isn't an end all be all, and through each phase, there will be a review, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Permit runs with the land. Ultimately, it's the owner that's signing it.
Yeah,
As we talk about permits in this office, you would kind of be what we would call the applicant.
Right.
As the licensee. So John, I was trying to find the Google Earth file you sent me.
I think I just need to sign in.
This feels similar to when Ethan gave his proposals about what logging positions needed to be done, and we were not logging experts.
Either, right?
So. I think the committee generally went with
The experts.
the experts, as long as it was in line with the management plan and the. Forest plan, as, and the easement, which, right, those came from the easement, right?
Mhm. Really nodding your head, or were you here for
No, I'm listening.
that? Is that your remembrance of the force,
Well. I'm not sure I was here for the earliest presentations when you think of it, I don't think I remember at that point, so, but certainly as that project went along, we were certainly reliant on. Ethan and others and knowing what they were going to do,
Mhm.
you know, and not saying, oh, no, you should. Put your
Right.
road here, he showed them to us
Mhm.
and,
Right, there were lots of educational walks on what needed to be done.
And I'm very happy to do that. For any of these lines,
Yeah.
you know, that you have questions or concerns about it, I'm very
I
happy.
do have a question though. So obviously, this whole community force has grown up through the McCulloughs over decades. And I can just see all these little switchbacks and connectors and everything were just piecemeal together over that time.
Yeah.
Do you think it's, your overall plan is for the better access and use for the general public by getting rid of them? Is that what I'm reading? That when you eliminate a bunch of little, I get lost out there, walking, skiing, whatever, you know, and that there'll be a general hope is that the general public will find the forest a better place to be.
Yeah,
100%.
exactly.
I think it's gotten way better, Reed. It used to
Oh,
be,
I
it used
know.
to be less signage.
Yeah,
It's not just about signage either.
No,
I mean,
no,
there,
no.
you know, the repetitive, you know, intersections are
Yeah.
not a great design for a network.
And it wasn't really a design, it was just.
No, it was
just
organic.
evolution, yeah.
Yeah, it was organic, like,
Yeah.
oh, we have a new bike race coming and let's build this section of
Yeah,
trail,
yeah.
and, like,
Yeah.
it's just how all these little sections appeared as.
And to use the property, like when we do group rides,
Mhm.
we instruct the kids, like, okay, we always stop in the intersection. And then there's like 20 intersections.
Yeah,
You have
right,
to
right.
stop at every intersection, it gets,
Right,
you know, takes time.
Do you think, because we're looking at. I think, in my college letter and then, another person submitted one, that there'll still be enough challenging areas. If this plan were to go forward for those who really want. You know, really steep areas, really challenging areas, so that they're not impacted.
Walkers can get as much challenge as they want. They can go anywhere.
Yeah.
There's no restriction. They can climb a wall if they want. But we're trying to build a sustainable network and steep is not where it's at.
No.
There are places where we can do steep and we propose those,
Mhm.
where they can walk
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
some other way that we can make it durable. But they're pretty limited and, if you can't use the trail in both directions, if you can't use it in all seasons, it really reduces its
No,
liability overall. And that's what we're trying to address, primarily is like that, many of our trails don't get used.
yeah,
And
so
why-
that's the key to it.
Why have them
Why
if
have
they're
them?
not,
Yes,
if they're
right.
not in use?
Right.
And if they're either too steep or too wet or, too something, then we should address that. Do you want me to do a little presentation on what we're talking about in terms of individual trails? Or
I have two
we're getting-
questions.
We're getting really close.
And
to
our-
the
yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
So we do have other, I guess it's 3 questions. We do have a few other items to attend to. So maybe we want to keep that in mind. One of my questions about this is just, like, when you're thinking about the trail network, are we thinking about this as bikers or skiers or walkers or all of the above?
All the above.
And then a question for the committee is what are we to do with the letters that we've received from the public and the color. So we have some things to weigh in our minds. I guess we just keep that.
We
put that
spoke with
there.
the McCullough today. They appeared to understand better after we finished talking with them. This map confused them, and I understand that. It's a tough thing to understand.
Yes.
And I'm
It
not,
looks fun, doesn't it?
my crayon coloring was awesome, but I'm in all the lines here. So once we explained more about what we were talking about, they were like, oh, we get it now. So we feel like we addressed many of their concerns. In terms of the other letter that we got, it said that adaptive folks have enough already, and we don't believe that. That's not a way that we want to treat our neighbors. There's nobody who gets excluded when you build a trail that is accessible to everybody.
I mean, we could also reach out, some of the comments just weren't accurate. Reducing trails will lead to overcrowding and trail erosion on remaining trails.
I don't think I'm asking us to go into the
Right.
specifics of
Yeah.
that letters, how much
Uh-huh.
we.
I think I guess the point is like, the only way to address it is to go talk to the person and clear up any confusion.
Well, I
but-
would also be interested in those survey results, if you
Mhm.
did reach out, I would like to see those before.
I think
Sure.
BLT would as well, just to have a better understanding of how that affected your trail planning.
Mhm.
Because that
Mhm.
is how it should work.
I will also say that we, looked at this through the lens of these standards.
Mhm.
And it's, something that kind of takes away the feelings a little bit, like I feel like I need this, I feel like I need that, when really the state is gonna be like, why are you doing this? How are you doing it? And that takes away some of that like emotion and.
Hey, I was on the school board for 20 years, I know how to deal with emotion.
I think it is a tricky task, though, that all community forests and planning committees have on their shoulders, though, and it's important to factor in the feelings and the logistics, and that's the role that you all have, is to plan with all of those factors. I see it in every single town that I work in, and it's not easy, so I commend you all on your effort in balancing them. And I think it would be helpful to see, the survey results, just as like an aspect of the public input. I trust that you did that. Again, it's just due diligence. Yeah.
Perhaps, Danielle, if we saw that, if the committee saw that, then we would be able to better say what the next step is. I mean, if I looked at them all and it was like, oh, I know where they're coming from, but you got engaged in that trail, therefore they shouldn't close it, is not a good reason, right? But if there's something like over and over and over, there's a particular thing, then we might wanna go on a field trip, so.
Well, I will say that, the feedback that we got was before we put this out. It was
Oh,
last
like,
winter.
interesting.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it
we're-
guided this work or no?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Yeah, great.
It was
That was the
also
plan,
a
yeah.
trail planning and a programming questionnaire, so it's more than just about the trails.
Cool,
To
great.
wrap it.
Although they're really very interrelated. What we can do for programming on these trails is limited by what they are.
Okay, I'm looking at the review process page here. It looks like we have introduced the comprehensive trail plan. We're sort of discussing it now. We're looking to see the results of the survey that you
and whatever,
And-
and put all the input you got.
Yeah, it would be nice to see a presentation of the input.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's what we're coming back with.
And then we can look at decide as a committee if that's sufficient and we're good to go, or if that raises more questions, I guess, is how it would work in my head. If it's something you can just send to us, we could all read it on our own too. We don't need to have a presentation on it if it's, I don't know what kind of
Working on
format.
it right now.
PowerPoint.
Right, and do we look for? No, we don't look for the public's input. Because they already,
I expect more public input. I
Yeah,
hope
we
for it.
could, I'm sure the select board.
This, now that it's out, I hope people are looking at it and having new thoughts.
Oh, that's true.
so do we want to seek public input? Committee?
We're, as long as you guys are okay with it, we'll publish this. Or if you wanna publish it on the town's website, that's okay too, I mean, we're not, this is not in any way a hidden thing. This is gonna be very public all the way up throughout the process, so.
Yeah, I know it was posted on the Catamount Community Forest Facebook page yesterday, the link to this plan, so.
To the map file or to? the-
I don't know, I think it's more the verbiage. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't click the link, I just saw that somebody had posted it.
Was
Does
this is
the-
posted on the website, right?
Sorry, has this committee ever done public outreach events before? I think it would be a good idea. I'll just say like in my professional role, that's like sort of the hallmark of public land management, that public outreach should always happen and it always slows the process down. So like it's a best practice and it takes more time.
So if we were to think of it similar to the logging project, Ethan Tapper had lots of walks in the forest. And signage, right, demonstrating the plan that was going to be going forward.
For education and communication, not to guide him for what trees to cut down though.
Right.
I think, the public input it did take a while. It was like 3 full months of sessions, survey open for 3 months. I guess,
No, it's still open.
yeah. Oh, the survey.
But I think that public outreach around this, I think it could be similar in that it wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, well, if, 5 people say this is my favorite trail, then that doesn't mean that you're not going to close it, right? Like if it's an unsustainable trail that's going to get eroded and be a problem, then it's going to get closed whether or not it's 5 people's favorite trail. But that like those education and outreach events are an opportunity to be like, this is why we're closing it. There's then potentially more community buy-in, less opposition when the plan is implemented, and there's the added benefit that people learn something about sustainable trail management. So like I see public outreach as serving a lot of important purposes. And so I guess like I don't think it would necessarily be different than the way Ethan did forest walks. The question is like who does those in this case? And I'm
And I guess
wondering like
timing as opposed to
And is that
getting-
sequential or in parallel to like step 4 when CCF gets to the point of recommending the plan to the select board? Right, cause then you gotta get through the whole Act 250, like if we make this all sequential, then.
No, I think parallel and for walks and stuff is fine. I mean, there's, and as much feedback as we get, these are still standards that the state wants us to see. So if we're meeting them, the I don't like this crew, we can't address, all of that. If somebody really loves some trail and really doesn't want to see it go, but the state is like, that's what you gotta do, that's what we gotta do.
Right, but you would be able to articulate that to that
Correct,
person.
yeah,
so.
and I'm more than happy to lead these walks and could easily schedule 3, this fall.
I would just make one suggestion, just because I do work in Chittenden County where constituents are the loudest. I would not present this as it is, because I think it's confusing and we will get more reactions like the 2 letters that were submitted. I'm not saying that this is not good work or that there's not clearly a lot of thought in this. I think that you could make your key more clear. The language was a little bit confusing, and I think that, what I would do instead of showing in a color the trails that you're eliminating, I would just like have the 2 different plans, like what the future plan would look like and what the current plan is side by side, because it makes it more easily digestible, which reduces emotional responses, because at the end of the day, relationships to trails, relationships to land fundamentally are emotional. Like the reason why you do trail work is because you love the land, I hope, or not just because trail work is the trail work, and that's the thing that we do. It's because it comes from a place of emotions, and yes, logically, like there is a way that things have to go, and if you don't make space for the emotional aspects, your process is gonna be drawn out so much longer than you want it to be. And I've seen that happen, and it's painful and it's very sad, and then no one wins, everybody loses. Because one person in the community can be very, very, very loud and disruptive. So, making things very easily digestible and very simple, and yes, offering an opportunity, whether it's walks or even doing a simple survey, just like giving a space, but not too much space for public input is like key. And I agree with what Kim said, it allows for buy-in and education. Because you don't want to get through almost having this done, and then some person in the community riles up conspiracy theorists about what's happening here, and then this one part, like the select board freaks out and is like, well, now we need to put this on pause because the community is freaking out, and it's just like a small group of constituents. Not pulling from a specific example at all, definitely not, so, just a suggestion.
Thank you.
You're gonna have to excuse me, I have another commitment to get to tonight.
And we're I think we're,
Okay, so,
thank you.
or can are you gonna wrap in 2 seconds?
Well, we meet in 2 weeks.
Do.
So what is what do we want to achieve tonight? We've got a lot.
Did the goals make sense?
Yes. Yes, I would be interested to see them in also like how they relate to the forest plan, but I can also go back and look to see that they are they're the work count, they're pulled from
Stole
the
a
plan.
lot from there.
Yeah.
I also read the management plan and the easement with regard to this plan, and it all lined up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Doing my job.
So how about maybe Danielle in 2 weeks, if we can get the information if we can get the information from which we've already done the surveys ahead of time, I'm happy to read it.
Right.
Over the weekend.
I can just email that to
Oh,
everybody.
perfect, okay.
There's
So-
only 34 responses, so it shouldn't.
Oh, good, it won't take that long, except they'll all talk about a trail that I don't know where it is, and I'll have to find the spaghetti.
I think many of them are more about the
General.
generalities and not about the.
Good, okay.
Don't change bear, but you know.
And so maybe on our agenda for 2 weeks could be like, what does that outreach plan look like?
Mm.
And maybe look over here, Alan, so I can look at you, I can't tell what hat you're wearing.
I'm mostly just
Maybe the
a
board
trail
could,
runner,
could,
mostly just a trail runner and biker, so.
yeah.
Let's see how.
Outdoor Family Center or the board or whoever
Yeah.
could maybe come up with, we'll have.
What the outreach could look like.
What it could look like, yeah. And then we could go from there.
Check.
I don't think it needs to take 3 months. I mean, honestly, you have a fabulous a passionate following of people who use that, but the vast majority of the town are not regular users and.
Is it conceivable, what you just said, is it conceivable that we get to the step 4
Well, I don't
by
think you
next
can
week,
approve
or?
the trail plan before we have the public input.
You mean next week we approve?
Well, see,
the
that
bill?
was my question, like, is the public input in parallel with submitting this to the select board, or is it together? So I wasn't hearing the same answer from everybody. Like,
And
it,
I don't think it's, I'm only one person on
Sequential.
the select board, but I'm not sure I would be willing to approve it without having any input, public outreach. That's why I'm saying maybe it doesn't have to be huge. I mean, it's,
Like beyond what's already been done?
no, I mean, you could, I was just thinking of, put it out there and this is an evening, come ask your questions. Cause that's all I was thinking. I wasn't thinking like a big
I
protracted
see, I
thing.
see, I see.
But then I was kind of loving the more protracted thing, and Kim seems to have some really good ideas about it, but I
I
do,
mean, the problem is just, will miss a whole nother year of progress. They'll miss a construct, I don't even know
when is the
will we get the
construction
con-
season?
when it's dry enough, I guess, to dig.
April, generally for us, is when we can start to work.
Mhm.
Especially with the weather that we've been having.
Yeah, right, it's dry in April and May, and then the rest of the summer's wet.
Yeah, so if we can get everything done in April and May, it'll be great.
Isn't it snowing in April?
It's still muddy in April.
It snowed at the end of March, and we
So
got maybe a
dry.
little
So
bit in
dry
the
in
first
April.
week there, but then it was done.
I wouldn't be surprised too, just from my experience, if when it's presented to the select board, people come for public comment.
Yeah.
to
Yes, that's
comment
another
on
way to do it
as
too.
well.
Mhm.
And I've seen that also done, and the select board will pass a plan with the amendments that include whatever,
Mhm.
if it comes to that. You also could just like smooth sail and the public doesn't care, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, a lot of times, something I think I'm
Million
geared up
ways
for
to
50
find
people
out.
to show up and
Yeah.
two show up, so.
Right, so we did post that this was happening tonight. And if we have our next meeting in 2 weeks, with a lot of it being for hearing about the trail plan,
Mhm.
the public does have
Sure.
that opportunity to
Yep,
come. And then they have a subsequent opportunity to then go to talk to the select board about their,
I mean, the outreach
Yeah.
needs to keep going, right, I guess. Cause like, even after next CCF meeting, and it hasn't gotten to the select board, it'll take time to get to the select board. I don't know all those steps there. Management plan wording needs to be updated, like if the select board's October, November. Like the outreach could continue through that.
So are you talking about the weddings?
No,
celebration
we're just
proposal
talking
or
about
this?
the trail plan. I don't know if they did they batch together?
I'm wondering if that might make sense, I'm not sure, but
They're both,
The-
and it's the management plan, right?
this is less so,
I wouldn't batch them together, sorry. That's my
No.
perspective. I wouldn't.
but the trail plan, to me is sort of different because you're not drafting an amendment. This is more like an addendum to the plan, as a separate document. Whereas when we're talking about celebrations, that is an edit within the document,
Okay,
which I think is different. This could be something where there's a signature line at the bottom that we're signing on town.
And VLT, please.
That's,
and so before it goes to Act 250, maybe you can update your process document so we can understand, before it's submitted for Act 250. We obviously have select board approval, easement holder approval, and then. And then that's in a certain document that we're signing, that you're signing at the bottom. What is that document? Is that the plan that we just had here?
yes, the select board or Eric as a designee would be signing the plan that you've drafted.
The one that we looked at tonight.
And I assume that part of that too,
Yes.
we're looking at Act 250 permits would be a approval for Eric to then sign subsequent permits as, as you get to that.
So, and Kim, I hope you're still back on, so I think we backed off and just said in 2 weeks, our 2 weeks, we'll just make sure the public is really clear that the committee's going to recommend or not recommend the trail plan to the select board, and that if people wanna speak up, they better show up. I mean,
Got it.
does that make sense, Kim? You're kind of the expert on this.
I mean, you make sense. It's definitely, it makes sense.
I think the
So-
outreach continue, I mean, that we would still do well to do additional outreach beyond that point.
But not delaying
Yeah.
the process.
But not
for-
delaying
right.
submitting all of that.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, cause Ethan had approval of the forest management plan, and that's when all his outreach happened after that, after the
Yeah.
forest management plan was approved and well into implementation of the forest management plan, the outreach continued.
Yeah, especially it's a multi-year plan, so.
I mean, we need to do the outreach to get fundraising, this work done anyway.
I guess maybe just one thought is that we should be really clear about, and I can't remember if Ethan did this, but about that fact, right? Like, because the thing that I think we don't want to have happen is for people to feel like outreach is lip service after, and that like them showing up and giving their thoughts is not actually going anywhere. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, let's just be careful about how the outreach that happens at the same time and after is messaged.
This could also continue, this conversation can continue at the next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay. Hint, hint.
and the more, I mean, if we could, yes, and then more, that gives more of a chance for the public to know that we're talking about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, then, so we are going to continue this discussion at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
And while we get we're gonna consume the survey results and then. Maybe have some blocks coming up, but that's separate from moving forward, so we will be. I guess we're probably. Thinking about recommending, or we're voting next meeting. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think if, as long as we make sure it's out there,
Right,
you know, that people know this is happening, I'm okay with it.
and then we're voting, and then it still goes to the land trust and the housing conservation, then it goes to the select board, so, yes, all right. great.
And the state.
Then the state, so we have a lot of steps to go through. Okay, and I guess we're moving our other business to next meeting too.
Yeah, that was really just leaving room at the end of the meeting in case there are other things, but I don't think there are.
Okay.
I will not attend the next meeting, right?
You've helped a lot with this meeting,
Well,
thank you.
great, and feel free to reach out. I mean, I'm all of Chittenden County, so every town forest that Vermont Land Trust holds an easement on in Chittenden County, I've sat in meetings like this. So I have a lot of experience and I'm happy to offer perspectives on anything. If you wanna reach out, you all have a plethora of experience as well. But I feel like my BLT role, this is great. So long as the vernal pool thing goes away, and the other substantial changes, I think it should be fine, so.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I would have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Well, there.
Okay, all in favor?
Okay.